Hello, welcome to Teal Tinted Glasses, episode 49. Me and Mr. Hockey Jerk tonight are going to talk about, the free agency and trades, and, we're just about to go live, and Steve Yzerman says, those Teal Tinted Glasses guys, those guys are pretty awesome. I'm going to steal their thunder. So now we're all frantically refreshing Twitter, waiting to see what have they given up to get Erik Karlsson, and how bad did the Senators get fleeced? Are the Rangers really the third team involved? What's it going to be? I mean, we're all waiting on pins and needles here, but as of right now, it's just trade call pending and nothing happening. Joining me tonight is Mr. Hockey Jerk.
So as you were letting the people know what we were doing, I'm refreshing Twitter myself, and I saw a tweet that said, wow, Karlsson for Girardi, which I thought was funny, and obviously that's not true. But
it'd be amazing.
Man, I mean, just when you think that Yzerman has no more tricks in his bag, he pulls another one out. I mean, Marty San Luis, he got a good haul for that, and, the McDonough and JT Miller trade, I thought, was a home run in his favor. Obviously, Sergachev and now possibly Erik Karlsson. I mean, it's borderline ridiculous at this point.
Yeah, it kind of is. I don't know. Like, I'm really unhappy now. I just, why didn't I wait a year? A year? Yeah, I guess it would have been a year. I could have waited a year later. Could have been a Lightning fan. Everything would be good. Nope. Here I am. Sharks fan. Sad Sharks fan. No Stanley Cup.
If
no
only
Steve Yzerman as GM.
If only Montreal had broken your heart a year later.
Right. Exactly. The year they won the cup.
Yeah, of course.
So I don't know. Here we are. Obviously, it's been a tough time to be a Sharks fan. Obviously, the big news, it's not even big news anymore. It's just the kind of the painful reminder, or maybe, I don't know. I don't know where everyone's at with it, but obviously the Sharks did not land John Tavares.
Skyler is typing in all caps. Now I'm scared.
We have details. Pierre LeBrun details. Okay, I'm just gonna refresh Twitter as I babble into my microphone. What are we getting here?
Is it the real Pierre LeBrun?
Yes, it's make sure we have blue check marks and everything else, guys. This is making for a really bad.
Because I'm not seeing anything.
I don't want to see dead air, man. Dead air is bad for a podcasting business, especially for one that does as little editing, as in no editing, as I do. So there's just really not much we can do. Oh, never mind. No deal. All right. No deal, kids. No deal. No check mark. That's okay.
It's okay. It's happened to all of us.
We forgive you. All right. So the Sharks lose out on Tavares. By all accounts, it was actually, for up to the time, it was like, oh, it's between the Leafs and the Sharks, But it turns out most people are now saying it was between the Leafs and the Islanders, which means the Sharks came in third in this little race, despite panicking and throwing out an extra, $2 million onto their contract offer. So obviously the Sharks put a lot of eggs into this basket. Where are you at with this where are you at on this, Jerk? Like, obviously it's easy in hindsight to go, well, we didn't get him, so obviously this was a stupid plan. But I don't know. Where were you on when Tavares decided that he was going to go home and started posting pictures of young John Tavares and his Toronto Maple Leaf everything?
Well, we are 361 days away from Tyler Seguin being a UFA, so really that's what I'm looking for. But I was never really expecting Tavares to come to the Sharks. I mean, it was just one of those things that really seemed too good to be true, and then the Sharks are making all these moves to get Tavares, and it's kind of like, well, okay, hold on a second. Maybe this could actually happen. And, from a perspective of, where the respective franchises were at and, what they could offer in terms of, dollars and playing time and line mates and that sort of stuff, in my totally unbiased opinion, I thought the Sharks were the best option. Obviously, that's not the case now. We went to Toronto, but it's one of those things where you have to just, you have to move on with life. And, as nice of a player Tavares would be, I mean, I'm really, really happy that $13 million is not tied up in one player.
Yeah, I kind of agree. Like I think on this show, I mean, we've answered a ton of questions about Tavares because people have asked them. So obviously we're going to give them answers. And I think that is kind of, for a long time, now granted, I didn't think he was going to end up on the Leafs. In fact, I was going to retweet a tweet that I made last year after Stamkos signed and said, congratulations, John Tavares, you're the next not Toronto Maple Leaf. But like I thought he was going to stay on the island, and I didn't really think he was going to come here over, up until. But then when it got down to that last, couple of days there, like I'm into it as much as everyone else at that point. I'm like, oh my god, there's a chance that John Tavares could come here. When I heard the Sharks up the offer, I got a little bit nervous because obviously I don't think you increase your offer unless things aren't going well for you. But
I'll just say this: Tavares did the Sharks a favor by saying no.
Maybe. I mean, it's John Tavares. I think John Tavares is a good player, like a really good player, right? But I'm not gonna lie, man. Once we got into like the thick of things, like I'm kind of like, this could happen, and I kind of got excited, and then I kind of got really disappointed when it didn't happen, even though I had maintained from forever ago that it was never going to happen. But being that close, I kind of got caught up in it, and it makes me sad.
I knew that the possibility of this happening it became realistic the second the Sharks traded Mikhail Bodker with no retained salary. I knew right there.
Right.
I was like, holy crap, something's happening here. And you know what? It didn't happen the way we wanted to, but to be a playoff contender and possibly a Stanley Cup contender and say that you've got, over $8 million in cap space with 99% of your roster filled out, that's no small feat. Yeah. And whether it's today or tomorrow or September or February, the Sharks could very easily add another player if they wanted to. And, as we've known before, Dylan Doug, he can make it work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was disappointed, but I mean, like, at the end of the day, I think after you kind of think about it and you kind of look, because obviously it's not only disappointing from the perspective we didn't get Tavares, but by the time we had an answer on Tavares, so many guys were already off the board. And I think that's where a lot of people, were obviously really frustrated because, again, the Sharks were all in on Tavares. And I think that had they made all those moves and then, just kind of backed off and settled for, like, I feel like this is a no-win situation for Doug Wilson. If he decides to say, okay, wait, this is getting too rich for my blood, and instead of offering the extra couple million goes and gets somebody else, that's not John Tavares. Because let's be honest, like, I mean, John Tavares was up here, like, this huge, there's a tier of, like, there's a tier between John Tavares, a tier of nothing, and then the rest of the free agent class. And I feel like had he, come so close and just kind of backed out at the last minute to say, grab a Paul Stastny or whatever, I feel like there'd be just as much anger as there was because he missed out on all these free agents because time is linear and, you couldn't do both.
I'm really glad that there wasn't at least an immediate plan B. I was really worried that, say, the Sharks didn't get John Tavares, like you said, Paul Stastny they were going to circle around on Paul Stastny. Now, when Paul Stastny was a UFA in 2014, I was all about it. I was like, yeah, bring him here, And not to say he's a bad player now, but he's definitely not, where he was 4 years ago. And, Vegas, they can afford to give him the deal that they gave him just because they are in a really good spot with their salary cap. But it's one of those things where, if you're the Sharks, like, you struck out on the biggest fish, so, anything less than that, even if it is Paul Stastny, is just, it's not good enough, and it's not going to be the same. The Sharks, in my opinion, they just need to stick with what they started 2 years ago, where, they just recoup picks as they go, play the young guys, and go from there. I mean, it's worked well for them. I mean, a Stanley Cup final, and then, this past year, even though they got handled by Vegas in the second round, I thought there were many instances where they very easily could have moved on to the third round. And I think if the Sharks just stand pat, eventually things are going to fall into place one way or the other.
So apparently just on people listening to this on replay, the Carlson to Lightning rumors have been struck down.
Well, no. Friedman. Well, no, because what I'm reading is getting denials. I'm sorry, I read that as getting details. Never mind.
Yeah, getting denials. So here we are. Unfortunately, I think I don't even know what we're talking about now. No, stupid. This is awful. No, I hear what you're saying though. I mean, like there's obviously a thing. The problem that I have is that we did move some contracts out, right? Like we did move Mikhail Bodker's contract out and stuff, but I'm not sold this is addition by subtraction though. Like Mikhail Bodker was never what we wanted him to be as far as contract goes. Like, I mean, getting out from under that contract is great, don't get me wrong, but who's replacing him?
Well, I mean, you're hoping that LeBanc had a good year, Timo Meier had a good year, and you're hoping those guys step forward. But keep in mind, we didn't even get Marcus Sorensen in the lineup until the playoffs, so he's definitely an option. And if he, like this coming regular season, if he plays the way he was playing in the playoffs, then he might be better than Mikhail Bodker, because there were so many times where Vegas was just taking advantage of the Sharks, and Marcus Sorensen was the only one who was trying to get things rolling.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people said Rudolph Balcers. He could be an option, but, a guy like him, you're probably going to have to play him, with either Joe or Logan Couture, and you're going to have to give him sheltered minutes, at least to start, And this is assuming that nothing else comes, between now and September, whatever day training camp starts. I mean, that's still 11 weeks away. It's plenty.
Well, I for sure, and I'm not, by no means am I throwing these questions out saying like these questions must be answered right now. It's right. July 5th and everything, everything must have an answer July 5th. Like, obviously not the case. But but I still think it's a question worth asking though, because I don't look. Mikhail Bodker had a decent second half to the season. You're right about Sorensen. We didn't really see Sorensen until the playoffs, and I wonder if Sorensen's gonna be one of these playoffs where you go, well, Sorensen's okay, but playoff Sorensen, now that's the guy you want, kind of like Joel Ward.
Regular season doesn't matter,
right? No, I get that. So I don't know. I just wonder. I just kind of wonder who fills in that gap though, because while I agree that getting out from under that Bodker contract was amazing, you're still minus. You still have a hole there to fill, and Marcus Sorensen, could definitely be that guy that comes up. And I think that, I don't know. I mean, Kevin LeBanc seems to get a lot of crap, but man, he put up a lot of points, and goal scoring is. I mean, I know goals are important, but goals were never his game.
Yeah, and that's what I have a hard time understanding is, LeBanc had a very underrated season. He put up a lot of assists, and if you ask me, he was a big reason why the power play got going towards the middle of the year. And, I think we need to see LeBanc, we need to see him stay with Couture and Hertl. I think that's when he was playing his best hockey, because I know he, kind of tailed off when he dropped down to that third line. But no, Kevin LeBanc, for all the concerns that we had, 2 years ago where he had NHLitis and, there was a question about his, commitment level, those are all gone for me. Like, LeBanc is, if you're saying who's going to replace Bodker's offense, the little bit that there was, LeBanc and Timo and maybe Marcus Sorensen are all going to exceed Bodker, but also what they did this past year, if you ask me. And I do think it's addition by subtraction. I saw there were a couple people saying that we traded Bodker for nothing, and my response was, okay, slow down, because this is something that had to be done one way or the other.
And this coming from Bodker's biggest fan.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you gotta know when to stare reality in the face. And you know what, Sleepy Mofo, I agree with you. I think LeBanc has a really good shot, and I think he probably should shoot more. But at the same time, if Couture and Hurdle are both going to put up 30 goals with a wealth of those assists from LeBanc, then I'm fine. I mean, goals are going to come from somebody. There is some more information regarding Carlson. I don't know if you saw.
No, I'm not seeing anything. I'm trying to keep an eye on the chat.
So Eric Erlandson, who's the Lightning's insider,
okay,
he said no confirmation on the report of Ottawa that a deal's done pending a trade call, and the sense is that this might be close, it sounds like it's not to that point yet. And Elliot Friedman,
you muted yourself.
My microphone came unplugged.
Oh, that'll do it.
Basically, Elliot Friedman said this may be the correct take. We'll see. Regarding, deals not done pending a call, but it could be there.
All right, fair enough. Yeah, and then I kind of had this in my notes too, and AOS is in the chat about Mike Hoffman. I mean, Mike Hoffman was kind of a means to an end, and I know that I was bitter, and this is why I didn't really want to do like a show immediately after free agency. I didn't really want to write anything immediately after free agency. It was because I had some venomy takes, and that were kind of just out of frustration, and I think sometimes like reading stupid takes makes me angry, and there was plenty to be had that night after the Tavares news came down. There's just plenty, and it makes me upset when people that I like say stupid things. And I say stupid things.
I almost deleted the Twitter app off my phone for that same reason.
And I went it's funny because I remember on, maybe it was last show even, I asked the question, is a bird in the hand worth two in the bush, where they had Hoffman, who, yes, there's a bunch of toxic drama there. And, but I still, I did ask the question, I think it was the last show, where I said, hey, we had this guy can put up points, this guy improves the team, and then we sent him to Florida. Does that, is that something we're going to look at and regret? Now, I think could the team have used someone of Mike Hoffman's skill? Yes. But I don't think, when they signed Evander Kane, they did their homework. They talked to the team. They talked to, guys like Joe Pavelski, who had played with him in Russia. They talked to Joe Thornton. They talked to guys that said, can we make this guy work, before they brought him into the locker room. I feel like with Mike Hoffman, that due diligence wasn't done because they didn't want to, because they had no intention of keeping him. And I think without having that due diligence done, you don't want to bring that kind of a circus into your locker room when you already have, I'm not saying Evander Kane's going to do something bad in San Jose, but there's that potential there, obviously. You only want to invite so many elements of chaos into one locker room before, you're just kind of inviting an implosion. And when you have guys signed into oblivion, not the smartest move. So should they have kept Mike Hoffman? No. I mean, it makes no sense. Based on what we know about how the Sharks have managed things, would Mike Hoffman have made this team better? Yeah, there's no denying that. But again, time is linear. We can all go back and use our hindsight and say, well, oh man, Tavares went to Toronto, so goddamn Doug Wilson's such an idiot. But I can coach a team to the Super Bowl the day after the game's played. Hindsight's 2020 for a reason, because you can look back and you can make all these stupid matter-of-fact statements when the reality is that no one knew. I mean, we all sat there waiting for, hoping that the news was going to come down in our favor. Had the news come down in our favor, obviously, you understand what I'm saying. I mean, obviously, if things have gone our way, then we're not having this conversation. But with the benefit of hindsight, I can tell you a lot of things that are, that are true, and I could make ridiculous arguments for it. But the reality is time's linear, and you don't have that benefit.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, especially with hockey, where how fast things move both in the game and off the ice. Like it's not one of those things that you can, it's not one of those things that you can or should, look back on and say, well, if we'd have done this, it would have been better. Or, it's one of those things, like I said, you have to just, move on with life and, just look at the future. Okay, plan A didn't work. Let's go to plan B. Plan B didn't work. Let's go to plan C. But the thing that I drew issue with, and, a lot of people saying, if we don't get John Tavares, is James Neal an option? Is Mike Hoffman an option? Is, insert goal-scoring winger here an option? And I think a lot of people are failing to realize that John Tavares was targeted because he's a franchise, elite, superstar, whatever term you want to use, center. And I think that's the key is, Logan Couture is great, but Jumbo Joe is not young. And, as we've seen from teams, who've won the Stanley Cup, I mean, you look at Pittsburgh, look at Los Angeles, look at Chicago, you have to have, really good centers who can, bring their wingers along and dominate the ice. And, that's the move. So if you get a goal-scoring winger, I mean, sure, James Neal or Mike Hoffman or, Max Pacioretty would have been nice in San Jose. But, I mean, if Dylan Gambrell is feeding them the puck, is it going to make a difference?
Agreed. Yeah, no, I completely agree with that assessment. I think that's the thing that I think that, I mean, look, I understand people are disappointed, but I'm glad, the Sharks were in there. I mean, the Sharks were a team that John Tavares said, yeah, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to listen to your pitch. And I think, I'm not saying, we should just all, worship Doug Wilson, for being, completely perfect. The man isn't flawless by any means, but I mean, there was other teams that were in a really good position that could have offered him money, could have, that are set up pretty decently, that couldn't even get in the room. And I think that says something for what Doug Wilson has built. Look, I understand that Doug Wilson is, ever the bridesmaid, never the bride, but at the same time, I mean, it says something for a team to be able to get in the room like that when other teams weren't even able to get into the room with them. They were relegated to maybe a phone call. And that includes a team that was in the Stanley Cup final last year.
Yeah, and that's the other thing is, I think too, something that we have to remember is, you look at the two teams that were, ultimately what Tavares made his decision on. You look at Toronto, which is where he was born, where he grew up, where he lives, and the Island, where he's spent the last decade of his life. And, it doesn't take a genius to realize that, he is not about, going out to a new, unfamiliar place and, doing that. That's not what he's all about. He wants to be somewhere that's familiar and somewhere that's comfortable. Why would you leave, something you're familiar with to go somewhere that you're unfamiliar with? I mean, it's not very often that we see it, but, the fact that the Sharks gave him way more money and he said no, I mean, that tells me that it's not about the money. It's about being comfortable. And if being in his hometown is comfortable, then you can't really, be upset about it, at least in my opinion.
Right. And just in the chat, they kind of circled back to Hoffman where, it's it's not really Hoffman that's the problem. It's his, his fiancée. But the problem is that if he backs, if his fiancée, again, none of this has been proven in court, But if Mike Hoffman's fiance really is doing this, and and Mike Hoffman is going to blindly defend her, 120%, what are you going to do? Like, yeah, it's not Mike Hoffman doing it, but that is still going to have an unfortunate negative impact in the room. It's going to have a negative impact on the team if those shenanigans were to come to San Jose, and without and again, when the Sharks brought Evander Kane in, they did their due diligence. I don't like, again, I just don't feel like Mike Hoffman was a means to an end. It wasn't, it was to dump Bodker's salary and then move him on to Florida for picks. I just think that with the Sharks, they did their homework before they brought Kane in. Kane wasn't a knee-jerk thing. I just don't think they entered it with the intention of ever having Hoffman stay. That's all. I think if they were seriously interested in Hoffman was their guy, they would have probably done a little more due diligence into it. So
yeah, and I mean, like I said, Hoffman is nice, but he's not make or break. I mean, you have guys on the Sharks who are stepping into these roles. I mean, man, Hurdle's playoffs, make me think that he can easily be the type of player Hoffman is. And, like I said, LeBanc and Meyer are obviously trending upward. But the thing about this whole Hoffman situation that kind of scares me more than anything is, but whether it's Hoffman and his fiance or Karlsson and his wife, there's no way that one of them is not lying here, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, cyberbullying is a huge thing to accuse somebody of. And if you're accusing somebody of cyberbullying, you're either telling the truth or you're a bad person. And on the flip side, if you are cyberbullying somebody and you publicly say that you're not, you're also a bad person. So, one of the sides of this issue is lying. And it's going to be a freaking landfill fire when it all comes out.
Yeah, I mean, again, I just think, like, the Sharks have obviously taken risks. Kurt, new subscriber in the chat, welcome to watching the show, Kurt. He mentioned, like, the Sharks are the thing with Merkley, but I feel like, again, it kind of goes back to what I said where, due diligence was done. Due diligence was done on the Merkley pick. Due diligence was done on bringing Kane to San Jose. I don't think that there was ever, because the intention was just dumping Bodker's salary, I just feel like, I don't think they did that due diligence because Hoffman staying here was never in the plans.
Right. And that's a good point. If it's been talked about how much research they did on Kane, and you mentioned it, and same thing with Merkley. There was that video with Doug Wilson Jr. and with all the staff, the scouting staff, talking about Merkley and, assessing where he's going to be in X amount of years and where he's at now. And I, like you said, I feel like Hoffman, it was one of those opportunities that kind of just fell into Doug Wilson's lap and he took advantage of it, which is why I think the trade was completed at 5:25 a.m. Pacific time, is because it was one of those things that just fell and he's like, okay, we can get some draft picks out of this. Like, we're just going to do it,
Yeah, and if Hoffman, does do well, it'll be in Florida, not in our division, just like John Tavares will be not in our division, not in our conference. I'm over it.
Yeah, well, I mean, because divisional play is just so important, right?
Yeah.
Obviously you play the teams in your division the most out of anybody else, but I mean, if you have to, the Sharks see Connor McDavid, depending on the year, 4 or 5 times a year, and I don't think it makes or break. Like, the Sharks could lose.
I hear you're saying.
The Sharks could lose all 5 games against Edmonton and still make the playoffs.
Okay, point taken. All right, so obviously, moving on from the free agency, I'm not upset that, like, again, I'm not upset that the Sharks didn't go out and just blow a bunch of money for the sake of blowing a bunch of money. So I don't know. I mean, do I think that the Sharks could improve a little bit? Yeah, I think that, I think that there are positions that could be filled from outside help, but they could also be filled in-house, I think, too, depending on how things break down. Dylan DeMello obviously wasn't qualified. I'm kind of surprised the Sharks haven't signed a depth D. I'm not saying like I would have gone out and given Luke Shen the money that Anaheim did, and thankfully it was Anaheim that took him. But I don't know. I'm kind of surprised that maybe like some of these depth deals haven't got done. But I think right now, if you're Doug Wilson, there's no rush to do this. I mean, you can find a seventh D guy in the middle of August when after they sweat out. After a guy's sweating, deciding whether he's gonna have to go to Europe or something, and you give him a deal at the last minute, and he takes a bottom discount deal, and I think that's probably the smart play at this point. Sharks did get some deals done though. Joe Thornton returns for 1 year at $5 million. I don't have an issue with this contract. I think that $5 million, $5 million's about right for a player of that stature, of that age. I think a perfect example of another player that's going to make $5 million next year is Zdeno Chara. Zdeno Chara is a great defenseman, but he's not the defenseman he used to be. And you would look at, if you just looked at Chara and took all what he used to be out of it, you'd be like, $5 million for this guy, forget it. But look at, I think that being a future Hall of Famer is gonna get you extra dollar signs when it's all said and done. So it's not the $8 million stupidity that he got last year, which I still think was dumb. I understand that whatever, the Sharks paid him back for taking hometown discounts and blah blah blah, but I just thought it was just stupid cap management last year. Just because you have money doesn't mean you should just throw it away. I feel like $5 million is probably about where I expected it to be completely honest, without a big signing. Where are you at this?
Well, and that's the thing that really bothers me about this too, is like, $5 million is such a small number compared to the whole grand scheme of things. And like I said earlier, this team, oh, sorry, I have a dog who's having a crisis.
That's okay.
This team is, this team is 99% built. I would say. I mean, you could start the season with this team you have now and be okay. But keyword okay.
Okay, yeah.
But Jumbo Joe for $5 million and that's the thing, 1 year deal. In 361 days, it's not going to matter. And right. Lest we forget that had Jumbo Joe was on pace had he played an 82 game season, he was on pace for 62 points. Like, are we just going to act like that's not impressive? Like, no. And that's even with playing on a knee that's supposedly still bad, which, I mean, if anybody has watched Jumbo Joe knows the kind of guy he is and knows the kind of worker he is in terms of his recovery. So I'm not worried at all. I think you give him the next 3 months and you let him rehab, and, if he can play the way he was playing last year, especially with how many goals he had by the time he was hurt, I mean, this could be a very underrated signing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing too is like money in the NHL isn't fair. Like you can look at guys with some contracts and then line them up with different, like, money is not fair in the NHL. Players get paid based on just a silly number of criterias. Joe Thornton, like you said, was on pace for a bunch of points, but it's not even just what he does, points. Like it's more than just the points. I mean, you look at, as much as we complain about how Joe Thornton kind of plays in the power play, you look at how the power play fell off without him. I mean, some, guys get paid for different reasons, I think. And I think that there's some, I don't want to say intangibles, because I know that's puts everyone's back up and says, intangibles are not worth getting money for. But I think that there's things that players bring to the room that, and to the ice where it's, it's important. I think that Joe Thornton, not only, another thing that happened with Joe Thornton not being on the ice is I thought that, Joe Thornton's a really great guy at being, what am I trying to say? He's a guy that, in the room, he takes a lot of pressure off of a lot of other guys. And I feel like if you look at Brent Burns, who's normally a jovial, happy-go-lucky guy, like, he got really testy in those interviews at the end, like as the year dragged on. And normally Joe Thornton, he's kind of the guy that takes all the pressure off the guys, like when, you can go back to when Hurdle scored the 4 goals and everyone was talking about how he disrespected the game and how he was so terrible. Then we had Rooster Trick Gate because because he said he'd pull out his cock and stroke it. But what he did there was a veteran move, because he took all the conversation about Hurdle and put it on himself, disrespecting a media guy and making people sad face. And I think those kind of traits, like that kind of, as much as people are like, oh, what does Joe Thornton ever do to lead this team? I mean, those are the things that he does to lead this team. He can, drag media attention off of other guys, which, not that say that San Jose is the most intense media market, but when the national media comes in, Joe Thornton is one of those guys that can take the pressure off.
Well, and like we saw earlier in the year, he, dragged his very bum leg to the airport and scooped up Evander Kane,
Yep.
And that's the thing is, I guarantee you, Doug or Peter DeBoer or anybody, I guarantee you none of them said, hey, go get Evander Kane. I guarantee you none of them said it. Jumbo Joe was probably like, no, we got this guy. He's good. We want to show him we love him. And Jumbo Joe probably did it on his own, which, you talk about how is this guy a leader? How is this guy a character? Like that right there. Like that, if somebody, that I know has, a really bad knee injury like Jumbo Joe, and they say they're picking me up from the airport, I'm telling him to stay home. And the fact that he, got up and whatever time it was, 4 a.m. or whatever, and did it. I mean, that shows you the kind of guy he is. And, we can all talk about how, okay, $5 million, if Jumbo Joe doesn't have a good year, yeah, it's not, it's not going to be a nice dollar amount. But at the same time, like, you're not going to disrespect a guy like Joe Thornton by giving him less money than he's worth.
Yeah, and Cheryl brought up a good point. Logan came out and said that Jumbo is what makes the room fun and great. And I've heard from other insiders too, like, whereas hockey is, unless you're in Calgary apparently, because then you can't not go out with the guys and go to a museum or whatever. But one of the things that I've always heard about Joe Thornton is that he is like, he is one of the guys that still kind of gets the players together to do stuff as a team without being forced to do it by the team. It's like there's no, he'll get the guys together to go out for one drink before everyone kind of goes on their own way before, whereas some other teams, the only time they get together as a team are because, it's like, oh, mandated, team bonding BS and stuff like that, right? Because, I mean, the way the NHL has changed, I mean, I think that, more players now, I mean, the role of the captain has changed in the NHL. Before, the captain was the guy you went to for pretty much everything. That, if you had an issue with, the team or coach or whatever, you went to the captain got things done for you. Captain doesn't do that anymore. You know who does that for you? Your agent does that for you. Your agent is now the guy that you go to because it's such a, it's a far more big money sport now. But the negative effect that's had on the sport is that guys kind of become their own little, they're basically little, as Jeff Merrick says, they're their own little mini corporations now. So, they don't always, not to say that, hockey's completely changed and all these guys don't want to be around each other, but, the guys that go out as a team after every game, like, that's becoming more and more rare, and the Sharks are still one of the teams that do that, and Joe Thornton's a big part of the reason why they do that. So I mean, yeah, I like the Thornton deal. I don't hate it. I would have been angry if it was more, because again, I don't feel like the Sharks are in a position to just waste cap space for the sake of wasting cap space. Again, it's July 5th. There's a lot of season left. Doug Wilson, maybe he pulls something at the deadline. Maybe there's a trade to be made somewhere. You don't want to just arbitrarily throw away cap space just to throw it away. So I'm okay with it. Moving on, Hurdle gets 4 years at 5.7. This contract seems more divisive among the fans. Some people feel like it's too much. I'm okay with it. for the most part. I think that, you're buying 2 UFA years. I don't love the no trade clause. Again, the Doug Wilson special, you can give me 3 teams that you'll go to. I think that's annoying, but it's better than a no move clause, obviously. But overall, I feel like you're paying for potential, but that's what you're always doing when you're handing out these RFA deals. You're paying for potential. They're so rare where I feel like an RFA gets a big check and has absolutely earned it. I mean, obviously there's going to be exceptions to the rule. Connor McDavid probably earned his contract. Leon Draisaitl earned most of his contract. But I find like a lot of times when you sign these RFA, especially when you start eating up in the UFA years, you're paying for potential. And we saw what a healthy Tomas Hertl looks like, this year. And I feel like if we get more years of healthy Tomas Hertl, this deal could end up being, a steal by the end of it. And with the way that the cap numbers have inflated, I mean, 5.7, man, they used to be a lot, but I don't feel like that's really a whole lot of money anymore.
Yeah, and I mean, I was kind of concerned when I saw that $5.7, $million number, just because, I looked at JT Miller's deal, which was 5.25 over 5 years, and I thought, I thought Hertl would get no more than that. Yeah. Considering JT Miller has played more games in the NHL and has scored more points, but like you said, they're paying Hertl for his potential, and the fact too that it's only a 4-year deal, that also makes it a little easier to stomach as well. But it's the same thing with Marcus Sorensen. If we get playoff Hertl all year, then it's going to be a hell of a deal by the end of it. And we even saw the steps Hertl took during the regular season this year. I mean, the biggest concern with Hertl was, can he do anything away from Joe Thornton? And that's all he did this year, was not play with Joe Thornton. And, he had his best year as a player, and, he's only getting better. And I'm really excited to see, what he can do, just because I feel like the biggest knock on him, aside from not being able to play away from Joe Thornton, was that despite how big he was, he didn't play big. And, and I feel like he's starting to do that. I mean, I can remember countless times in the playoffs and regular season, he's chipping the puck in, and then he's the first guy to go get it. He's hitting, he's getting to the front of the net and, making his body a presence and letting the other team know that, you're going to have to fight for that ice. And, like you said, it's a deal on potential.
Right.
And if he hits that potential, then that deal is going to be a bargain by the end of it.
Right, and that's it. Like, I'm not saying it's a great deal, but I feel like, again, like, the cap goes up every year, it seems, and this time the cap made a pretty significant jump. It's just guys are going to get paid more and more every year. Like, the one thing that happens is when the ceiling goes up, the floor comes up too, and I just feel like guys are going to benefit from that, getting a little extra money. Hertl also, this was another guy who could have gone to arbitration, and, if arbitrator just looks at the past season, he's going to get stupid money from an arbitrator. And then what do you do? Like, I worry that he could have gotten more money from an arbitrator. And then what do you do? The Sharks walk away from Tomas Hertl at this point? They can't. They'd be absolutely backed into a corner at this point, because they can't walk away from Tomas Hertl.
Yeah, it would have been a huge mistake. Like I said, especially with the season he had and the playoffs alone that he had this year. I mean, it was, one of my biggest knocks on the Sharks in my entire time as being a fan is that they appeared to have no resiliency in them when they were losing. And it seemed like every time the Sharks were down or facing adversity this season, it was Hertl who was getting things rolling in their favor. And that's the kind of guy you want to keep around. I mean, I'm not going to say we can put the C on his sweater tomorrow, but if he continues on the same trajectory he's been on the last 2 years, it's definitely a possibility down the road.
Yep. No, I think so too. And I don't know. I'm fine with it. Obviously, so Chris Tierney did file for salary arbitration today.
Drew Weber's favorite depth forward.
Yes. Important to note, super important to note, and I tweeted this out today too, is that the majority of these things never actually get before an arbitrator. A deal usually gets done prior. I don't want this to go to arbitration. Arbitration rewards generally favor the player over the team, generally speaking, which is why I think this year I think more and more you're seeing teams. I think they showed, there was a tweet, I can't remember who tweeted it out, and I'll go find and I'll retweet it later, but it basically showed like the number of salary arbitration hearings that have been scheduled based on, the deadline to file, and it's gone up every year. And why wouldn't it? Because I think at this point, if you're a player and you have arbitration rights, not going to arbitration, just hurts your leverage, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the whole point of arbitration, like you said, it favors the player, and it's the team is obviously going to scrutinize the player and call out their faults and that kind of stuff. But it's a good way for the player to say, "This is why I'm good. This is why I deserve this money." And this situation, I don't think it's going to resolve as quickly as people anticipated, because if you recall last year, the Sharks never offered Tierney a in quotes regular extension. He accepted and signed his qualifying offer.
Correct.
That they gave him to hold his RFA rights. And myself included, I was on board of trade Tierney for assets, and I'm still kind of on that train. Even the fact that he had his best season in the league helps that cause, obviously, but for all intents and purposes, it appeared like the Sharks were going to trade Tierney last summer after I don't want to say they forced him to accept his qualifying offer.
Well, they did, though. They really did.
But yeah, they didn't really do him any favors either. And you have to wonder if that, those actions still linger, if this thing goes to arbitration, or, if they get back in the room and try and negotiate it independently.
Right. And here's the thing, because they really did force him, because without having arbitration rights, your options are basically sign the deal in front of you or sit at home. That's it. That was Chris Tierney's options last year. Take the qualifying offer and nothing else, or sit at home until you're ready to sign the contract. And if you don't sign the contract by a certain point, you can't play, and then you lose an entire year going into arbitration. Having arbitration rights the following year obviously doesn't help you because you sat at home for the whole time. And so I think that's what, for him, I could understand him being upset and understanding that he kind of wants to be paid for for kind of the money he left on the table last year. I don't blame him. I'm just concerned that, again, an arbitrator is going to give him a 1 or 2 year deal. If he makes it to arbitration, not only is that relationship going to get soured, but what is the arbitrator going to give him? Because if you give him north of 2 point, I think, I've said this on numerous shows, anything over 2.5 is ludicrous for Chris Tierney.
If you ask me, anything over $2 million is ludicrous.
Well, again, inflation. Again, right? This is the same thing. To me, it's like 2.5 is the new 2, 8 is the new 6, apparently.
Right. But no, that's actually a good point that you make. But I don't know. His breakthrough year after 4 years in the league, he definitely picked the right year to have his best year ever. But I have a hard time thinking that we're going to get any more out of Chris Tierney. Especially because he hit 17 goals at the end of March, and then we didn't hear from him until the Sharks got eliminated by Vegas.
Well, and I think the thing with Chris Tierney too that makes me nervous, and Circling the Cup, the guys at Circling the Cup has been really
love those guys.
Yeah, me too. Have been really on this, and they pointed out, yes, some people are going to say, well, it's nice when Chris Tierney finally wasn't anchored down by the John Scotts and all the other guys that he's kind of been anchored down by, but at the same time he doesn't really drive. He's not the possession driver on his line. He's not the guy that drives on his line. He benefited from playing with better players, but he's still, even by, and I'm trying to put this into words in a way that just kind of makes sense, even though he was better with better players, but it's not that he didn't make that line significantly better on his own. The better players carried him.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the part that concerns me.
Well, and who did he, you think about who he spent most of the year with. He spent it with Kevin LeBanc, who, as we alluded to, had a stupid year racking up the assists.
Yep.
And Mikhail Bodker, who, despite the fact that he had another year of underwhelming, had a pretty good year, at least in terms of, goals and, his commitment to playing. And I'm sure I'm going to get a text from Drew Weber about how I'm a hater and I'm the worst person ever. But, I mean...
we invited Drew on the show tonight, and he was like, no, I got class.
Yeah,
so forget him.
He's too busy, going to London, Ontario, or wherever Chris Tierney's from, and, sitting outside his front porch. But, like...
I have school. I can't do a podcast.
Yeah, right? Why would you... Yeah.
But he's the real hockey jerk. Let's be honest here.
Who would you rather see gone, LeBanc or Tierney? Chris Tierney, obviously. I mean, it's all about. You have to look at. It's hockey is definitely a game of what have you done for me lately. There's no doubt about that. But it's also a game of what will you do for me. And unfortunately, I think we've seen all there is to see from Chris Tierney. But for Kevin LeBanc, the ceiling is still there. I mean. Had a lot of haters, and us on this podcast included, who called him out time and time again, and he, really stuck it to us, especially this season. So, it's going to be interesting.
It's going to be interesting, though, but I don't know if I would, it depends on if you say, who'd you rather keep, LeBanc or Tierney. Right now, you can't really move Tierney, though, unless you have a center coming in. Like, the Sharks are ill-equipped right now to fill in both their third and fourth line centers in-house. They can do one. They can bring in a fourth line center from in-house. I don't think they need to, I think that letting Eric Fehr go, I like Eric Fehr. Like, I like what he did for the Sharks, but I feel like his skill set is replaceable in-house. I don't feel like we can do that twice. And that would be a concern for me.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, you look at, you've got Tierney, you've got Gambrell, you've got Chartier, you've got Suomela, who all can jump into that 4C spot. But like you said, you look at the third line center, and Chris Tierney is the only one of those four who have played 3C in the NHL. So you argue that he has the inside edge. But again, like, is he going to put up third line numbers again? I mean,
well, if he's playing with third line wingers, hopefully.
Right, but I mean, I
hear what you're saying.
I'd hate for people to get the idea that he's like the next Logan Couture. Like, unfortunately, I mean, obviously you want to strive to be the best and, especially as a professional athlete, but at the same time, you got to kind of know your ceiling at a certain point.
Yeah. Kurt, I don't think the Sharks gave up on Chartier. I think Chartier his health is obviously more important than his development at this point. I think the Sharks want to see Chartier healthy before they worry about anything else. As far as Chartier goes, again, I think that this is but I think you bring up a great point. Whereas I don't foresee, like, the one thing with Chris Tierney is I don't foresee Chris Tierney being a second line center in this league at this point. And that's the thing. Like, yeah, he's an adequate 3C, but he's not going to get any bigger. Like, Chris Tierney isn't going to be the answer when Joe Thornton finally goes, says peace out, people, and Logan Couture becomes the de facto number one. Chris Tierney being the de facto 2 would be a disaster, in my opinion, especially in the Pacific Division, division that has teams that are just decked down the middle.
Well, and that's the thing, and it's like I said, I said on Twitter after John Tavares got signed, and fans of various teams are all saying, "Oh, this is our plan B, this, that, and the other," and it's like, oh darn, you missed out on the Corvette, so why don't you go pick yourself up a Honda Civic from 2001?
Right. Yeah, I love my 2001. Yeah, no, absolutely. Sign me up for that. I don't need that Ferrari. Ferrari. Whatever. I need that Pinto over there.
And the and the other thing too, just talking about Chartier, we have to remember he in the last year and a half he's had 3 concussions.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that's the thing. Like, and we're gonna do a deep dive for those that are listening here or on the replay. We're gonna do a deep dive into the prospect scrimmages and stuff on Sunday night. Zach is gonna join me and Jerk. So if you're watching and you haven't subscribed yet, please hit the subscribe button, and then you will get you'll get the notification when we go live. But Sunday, looking like Sunday at 7 Pacific, 10 Eastern, we're definitely going to get more into the prospect side of things. So if I sound like I keep trying to veer off that topic, it's because it's something that we're going to definitely cover more deeply on the next show, which will be Sunday. And then after Sunday, we'll be back when we're back. We do this all summer. It might not be specifically week to week because I know I got vacation coming up. I'm sure these guys have stuff that they want to do while it's summer too, and there's nothing to talk about. But definitely make sure you hit the subscribe button. Follow us on Twitter at Teal Tinted Pod and all that wonderful stuff. Right, Mr. Hockey Jerk?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
derp dive.
and that's the thing is, a lot of not just Sharks podcasts, but hockey podcasts in general. Summertime comes around, and time to hibernate for a couple months. But no, we're gonna be here. We'll talk about anything hockey. Trade signings. I don't know if you still want to talk about signings today, but that and just anything in general. I mean, we're gonna be here all summer, and the content is gonna rely, I would say, 79% on the chat. So if there's something that just your little heart wants us to talk about, just get on that keyboard and type it in there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm done with something. It's crazy because there's so much stuff that has happened since we last recorded, right? Because we last recorded the draft.
Yeah, day 2 of the draft,
day 2 of the draft,
long time ago.
Which feels like an eternity ago now. So there's one question I did want to ask. I mean, there's so much to decompress, which is why I kind of tried to focus this on, when I do the notes, I try to focus because we just can't cover everything that happened from the draft to now. I mean, we could go through every team signings, but that's just, I think we'll circle back to signings at some point. My question is for you, is Gary Bettman, Hall of Famer. What say you?
Yes, but not right now. A lot of people have made the argument that he shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame because he's still active, which I agree with. But next whenever he steps down, if he ever steps down, he's definitely gonna deserve to be in there. I mean, you talk about lockouts and strikes and ignoring concussion symptoms. Like, he's done a lot of good for the league. I mean, I know a lot of people think that outdoor games and European games are lame, but you know what? They put the spotlight. They put previously unused or unlooked at spotlights onto the product. And I mean, obviously Atlanta was a flop, and Arizona is still trying to figure things out. But I mean, you look at Vegas, you look at Nashville. You look at Columbus now. I mean, these are non-traditional markets. Tampa Bay. These are non-traditional markets that have seen major success, and that's a big reason of that is because of Gary Bettman and the work he's done. And like I said before, he's definitely got his fair share of criticism, and it's all deserved. But
right,
he thinks he definitely deserves a fair share of praise as well.
Yeah, I think that look at when Gary Bettman took over, I mean, the league was a $1 million business, hundreds of millions of dollars. Don't get me wrong, but still in the millions nonetheless. Hockey is a $1 billion business now, and it's not just inflation, because the amount of money that was being made before Bettman to now, I mean, considering, Gary Bettman, for all of his flaws, and there are plenty, don't get me wrong. And some of the things that he gets blamed for, though, aren't necessarily completely his fault. You got to remember who he works for. Now, that works for praise as well. Obviously, sometimes, I think that, the owners who are really the puppet master, they do things right and they do things wrong. But I think things like not going to the Olympics, where Gary Bettman takes a lot of heat, that's owners, man. The owners just don't want to take the risk, especially after what happened to John Tavares at the Olympics, where, what did the NHL, what did the Islanders get from that? They had their season go to hell in a handbasket for something that the league doesn't really get compensated for. And that's, and that's obviously a big concern when you are investing, obviously what John Tavares has invested tens of millions of dollars into now, by the Maple Leafs. So, and you see some of these other contracts getting handed out where guys are obviously making significant amounts of money. So I think that, yeah, I mean, he has to bear the brunt of it, but really that decision wasn't his. That decision was that comes more from the owners. Now, the lockouts, obviously, the owners want to make more money, and it's his job to make sure that, that the owners get the deal that they wanted the lockout. But at the same time, the owners, again, if they vote unanimously for a lockout, I mean, obviously, yeah, Gary's selling them a vision, but, the owners are saying, yeah, this is what we want. We need a salary cap, and we need blah, 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 for us to make money. So I think that, yeah, the lockouts suck, and I feel like obviously there's a lot of criticisms there. I don't like missing half seasons and entire seasons for lockouts, and I'm definitely not condoning that. But at the same point, franchise values have never been higher. He just collected a $500 million check from Vegas for an expansion team. He's going to collect a $650 million check for Seattle. And if anyone moves anytime soon, Phoenix, Arizona, then, he's going to collect a giant check for that, just the relocation on top of whatever, he gets for whatever the owners get for the franchise. And you look at Carolina just got sold for way more than they should have gotten sold for. And that's the other thing, too, I think that Gary Bettman doesn't get enough credit for, is that for the most part, with the exception of Atlanta, where there was just nothing going to save that team, Gary Bettman has found owners for failing teams. And some of them have turned out for the better. I mean, again, you go back and you look at Tampa Bay, finding Jeff Vinnick to come in there and own the Lightning. I mean, Gary Bettman's a big part of finding these people to own these teams, and I think he gets, for every John Spano he's had, he's found a Jeff Vinnick, he's found whoever's the crazy guy in Carolina right now.
Well, and I could be a little hazy on these details, but if I recall correctly, wasn't the Tampa Bay Lightning, like, their owner in the late 1990s, wasn't he part of like a pyramid scheme or like organizing one or something? Like, there's something really bad
about some silliness. Yeah, there's been some silliness in Tampa Bay. But
and now look at they are trading for every team's best defenseman.
That's true. Every team's best defenseman belongs to Tampa Bay. No, but I mean, look at I mean, for all the criticisms of putting teams in stupid places, putting teams in stupid places is what has made the TV deal worth as much as it is. Again, I'm not saying that it should be, that Gary Bettman should be just lavished praise upon. But I feel like, yeah, should he be in the Hall of Fame as a builder? Absolutely. He's helped build the league to just ridiculous heights from where it started. And yeah, maybe it's not the NBA and maybe it's not the NFL, but he has made hockey fans in places that, had the NHL not expanded where it expanded to, there would not be hockey fans. Period. And so, I mean, I'm not going to, I know that eventually it's going to get to the point where, when it comes to Gary Bettman, I'm going to start yelling at a wall. So I'm not going to do that. But I'm fine with it. I wish it wasn't the same year that Willie O'Ree went in, and I wish it wasn't still while he was active commissioner. But would he have gotten there eventually? Absolutely. Your thoughts, Jerk, on Willie O'Ree getting in?
You know what? I think it's great. Obviously didn't have a huge NHL career, but again, it's the Hockey Hall of Fame, not the NHL Hall of Fame. And
correct.
When you consider, the walls that he knocked down and just, how much of an icon and an inspiration he's been for, so many, kids of color and, it's a long time coming, if you ask me. I mean, there's so much that he's done. Yeah, there's so much that he's done, and I'll just say it's about time.
About damn time. Yeah, and I think the builder's obviously appropriate. Look, in the NHL, Willie O'Ree didn't have a Hall of Fame career, right? Like, I know one of the questions that I always get asked is like, well, isn't Willie O'Ree like, isn't he hockey's Jackie Robinson? And I would say yes, but no, because, Jackie Robinson still had a Hall of Fame career outside of, being a person of color to break the you guys are jerks. Just for why I'm laughing, Mike Neff says someone get Ian a Bettman bobblehead so you can lick it. Totally taking me off a very serious thing that I was trying to say. But yeah, I mean, I think that Willie O'Ree should have been in there a long time ago. I think the Hall of Fame has done some screwed up things. I think that Pat Burns should have been alive to get in there, and I'm glad that Willie O'Ree was still with us to get into the Hall of Fame when he did. So I asked a question of our listeners, very low-key, didn't really promote it well enough, but I asked for winners and losers. And before I tell you who some of the people voted for on Twitter for winners and losers, I wanted to ask your winners and losers thus far, Mr. Jerk.
All right. So, winners. LA Kings, if you ask me. You go back to that first round series against the Vegas Golden Knights, and defensively, they did everything right. Had they scored more goals, they very easily could have beat Vegas. And you bring in a guy like Ilya Kovalchuk, and I know what people are going to say. He's old. He can't skate. He goes to Russia, this, that, and the other. But, he could still put up 30 goals in the NHL, and I'm willing to bet anybody in the chat that he hits at least 30 this year. And so the LA gets goal scoring that they've needed for a couple of years at this point. I like what the Calgary Flames did. I mean, you look at Hamilton for Hanifin, and it's definitely getting some future for a piece you have now. But I mean, Ferland and Fox for Elias Lindholm, I think that's a good pickup there. I like Elias Lindholm as a player, and same thing. Buffalo, I really like. I mean, they get a king's ransom for Ryan O'Reilly, and it's a good combination. You get Tage Thompson, who's a prospect that's got a really high ceiling. They get draft picks, obviously, but they also get Sabatka and Berglund, who are NHL roster players, which is what they've needed since they started their rebuild 4 years ago. And you know what? Same thing. St. Louis, yeah, they gave up a bunch of stuff, but St. Louis had forward prospects to give up, but now they have another top six center in addition to Braden Shen, and the St. Louis Blues have the potential to be a very scary team this year.
What about David Perron, though? Because, I was kind of surprised.
Oh, I hate David Perron.
I know you hate David Perron, but were you surprised that St. Louis went back that way?
Oh, well, I'm sorry. I forgot to mention that Calgary also picked up James the Real Deal Neal, which
yes.
How I forget, I'm not sure. I'm really sorry about that. But, David Perron, I mean, if he can have the kind of season in St. Louis that he had with Vegas, then I think it's a smart pickup. But this is a guy who was traded and then went back and then was exposed in favor of a crappier player. I mean, he went to the team and said, "Will you sign me?" And the team said yes. But, I mean, how soon before David Perron is, leave St. Louis again?
Well, I'm just surprised because, I wasn't surprised that Vegas didn't go back. I mean, when you're fighting for ice time in the final with Tomas Tatar, that's bad. You've hit a career low at this point. Well,
I mean, Tomas Tatar of this year, sure, but I mean, if Vegas, because thing is, no more David Perron, no more James Neal. If you're doing a mock lineup of the Golden Knights, Tomas Tatar is in your top six. And
for sure.
You know what? If Vegas gets the Tatar that Detroit had all those years, then that what they gave up for him is going to look like nothing. And, I like Tatar as a player. I think he's a really underrated goal scorer. And, collectively, the season as a whole wasn't a bad season. Obviously, didn't get off on the right foot with Vegas. But I think, a chance to play higher in the lineup and a full season to kind of get things rolling, I think that pickup for them will eventually work out.
Yeah, for me, I agree with all we said. I don't know. I'm not sure I would go as far as to say, like, I mean, Calgary did a lot. And I wrote an article today on Teal Town, basically just kind of, some sober reflection of after the trade deadline. And I like, I like some of what Calgary did. I'm just not convinced they're better. And I feel like that's the same for, like, I feel like the Pacific is, like, the same as it ever was. Like, it's just, like, I don't feel like much has changed. Like, the Sharks, I feel like they're okay still. I feel like they're easily a playoff team in this division. Calgary, I'm not sold on the back end. Like, I think Hanifin going down the road for sure. That might end up being a good deal, but immediately I don't like their blue line. Mike Smith doesn't scare me anymore, as far as and hey, look, he's in a contract here, so maybe he's going to blow his socks off. Calgary's going to win the division, and I'm going to look like an idiot. But I'm not scared of Calgary. I feel like, this is a team that has at best moved some chairs around, right?
Yeah, I mean. Like I said, I like getting a Lindholm for essentially Furland and Fox. I mean, I like that, but no, like we both said, Hanifin, getting Hanifin for Hamilton, it's definitely a downgrade right now. But in the future, I think they'll eventually come out ahead. But yeah, I think, I mean, I hate to bring back a phrase that I know Sharks fans are going to be very edgy about, but Calgary took one step back so they could take two steps forward,
Yes.
And eventually I think Calgary is going to figure it out. What do you think about Arizona? I like what they did.
I like what Arizona did, and I think Arizona's the team that are going to be better, but how much better? Because, I mean, they can't be any worse.
Well,
Buffalo, hold my beer.
Yeah.
But no, I feel like I like a lot of what Arizona did. I mean, I thought, picking up Galchenyuk for Domi, I like that deal for them. At first, that's kind of like, what are they doing? But I mean, when you look in deeper into it, it's hard to, Galchenyuk's been in the league for twice the time that Domi has. So you think he's this old guy when reality is he's a year older than Domi. So. And it's easy to forget that with some of these guys, that make it into the league when they're 18. It just feels like, after, he's only 24, and it feels like he's been here forever. Like he's this grizzled veteran, right? I like that deal, for Arizona. I think that they needed some help down the middle. And then Grabner, that's another great signing for them, underrated signing, underrated guy.
Really good goal scorer at even strength too. I mean, I think I want to say 90% of his goals this year were 5v5, which is impressive considering he was a 20+ goal scorer this year.
Right.
No, I think Arizona did a lot of good things. I think, obviously, I think Ekman Larsson is going to bounce back, and
Yes.
Obviously, Hjalmarsson brings a lot to that team, and Goligoski and Demers are good guys there. And I mean, we've only seen very little from Jacob Chychrun. I mean, it's only a matter of time before he breaks through.
Yeah, no, and that's the other thing too. Hjalmarsson, I think that's a huge signing for them. Because I look at Hjalmarsson, was a UFA, he could have walked.
Yeah.
And they sold him on sticking around. And I think Hjalmarsson could have, I don't think Hjalmarsson had the season he wanted to last year, but someone would have paid him.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at those 3 Stanley Cups alone, and you know what? There was a lot of concern, too, that they weren't going to be able to re-sign Antti Ranta, but they did.
They did.
And, Antti Ranta had a pitiful start to the season, but his last 20 starts, he didn't let in more than 2 goals ever.
And the Coyotes were a much better team in the second. I mean, obviously, look at the first half of the season, they had nothing to play for in the second half. And I know that's like, well, people are like, oh, well, the pressure was off. And maybe there's something to that. But I still think with the way the Coyotes finished the season, if they can replicate that to start, yeah, they can be a mover. Are they a playoff team? I don't know. I'm so sick and tired of picking the Coyotes to make the playoffs at this point, right? Like, I need to see it. Is this a playoff team? I'm saying no. But if I see it, I'll believe it because I have no choice. But I can't get on the Coyotes bandwagon again. I just can't do it.
Yeah, I remember when they traded for Duclair, I was really excited, and look where it's got me. That was so long ago.
Right. Yeah. So I can't do it. I can't do it again.
But I think optimistic.
But yeah, I think of the teams that actually improved, Arizona did. The problem is they're starting so far in the basement that I just don't know how much, where that puts them when it's all said and done. And I think that's my concern with the Coyotes because they have a lot of ground to make up. And I feel like, yeah, the Oilers did nothing because Lucic kind of made their, makes their ability to do anything null and void because they still have to give, a new deal to Darnell Nurse, who I think is going to make, I don't think he's going to break the bank, but he's going to get paid.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what's going to happen with Darnell Nurse, obviously, but he's going to get paid. But they couldn't really do anything. But at the same time, I don't think Edmonton Oilers are as bad as they were last year.
I mean, there's something to be said about that defense.
The defense isn't good. It's not good. And they definitely need to improve it. But I feel like if it's even remotely healthy, though, like it's not going to be as bad as it was last year. Because I think the one thing, like, there's just no health on that blue line last year.
Yeah, I mean, and that's Sekera was hurt, and Clefbaum had a down year, and
right.
I mean, Adam Larson.
I think Clefbaum was playing hurt for the second half of the year. So I mean,
yeah.
But Lucic is still gonna be their anchor for the rest of time. But I still think like I can't. Again, am I saying the Oilers are gonna be a playoff team next year? I'm not saying they're gonna be a playoff team next year, but I can't count out a team with Connor McDavid on it.
But my only concern is have they run Cam Talbot into the ground?
Right, and that's a good question, and we won't know the answer to that till the season starts. Gosh, I mean, other than that, trying to think of some other teams around the Pacific that I hear what you're saying about. I'm kind of on the other side of the fence with you on Lucic, or not on Lucic, sorry, on Kovalchuk.
Mm-hmm.
I'm concerned about the speed on a team that really doesn't have any to start.
Sure.
I think that, it's going to be interesting. I'm not saying, like, look, Kovalchuk is a world-class goal scorer. I'm just concerned that with how much faster the game has gotten since he's left, I'm just curious to see, like, LA, I mean, they've got all these guys signed into oblivion, so there's not much they can do. So I think this is maybe the right move because they're just going to, they kind of have to, they've kind of made their bed, now they got to lay in it, right? Now you've got Doughty signed into oblivion. I mean, what do you do? So I feel like they're going to score more goals. I'm just not sure that they're not going to get, that a faster team isn't just going to skate around them still.
I think they'll do well enough to make the playoffs, but anything beyond that is a coin toss.
Right. Anaheim's an interesting one too. I mean, obviously Bieksa is a UFA at this point.
Addition by subtraction.
Francois Beauchemin retired, so they brought in Luke Shen and Andre Schuster to kind of fill those roles. I know Kevin was really high, and Kevin will be back on the show sooner than later, and I'll let him explain why. But I know he's kind of high on Schuster signing on the Schuster. I'm not really. I feel like again it's just it's margin. It's I mean obviously it's an improvement, but how much?
Yeah, exactly. It is definitely an improvement, but it's it's not an amazingly make or break improvement. I mean, Ducks are interesting. I feel like the Ducks are still good enough to make the playoffs. I mean that
Oh, for sure.
their top nine is probably one of the best in the league, and that decor is really good as well. And I'm a big fan of John Gibson, but until Getzlaff and Perry can relax, they're not going to get anywhere. I mean, they're and don't get the wrong idea. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Ryan Getzlaff, but for a guy who wears the C on his chest, he's supposed to be the one who's cool and calm in a losing situation. And he was really running up the penalty sheet in Game 3 of that series against the Sharks.
Yeah, I mean the Sharks. I look at the signing of Shen and Schuster, and I go, well, the Sharks will still run circles around that decor.
Yeah.
I don't know. Who am I missing?
Vegas.
You know what? Last year I said Vegas was going to be terrible, and they weren't. So I just I refuse to ever say anything about Vegas ever again, and hope that instead of saying they're terrible and having them be great, I just say nothing and they're okay.
I think they'll be good. I mean, obviously, they bring in Paul Stastny.
I like the Paul
Stastny to kind of be 1-2 with Wild Bill, and so I think from that standpoint, I think they're a better team. But Neal and Perron put up a wealth of points for them, and those guys are gone, for nothing. And I mean, Fleury is still there. Miller and Theodore are both RFAs, and they're going to get back. I don't want to say Vegas is going to miss the playoffs because I don't think they are going to just totally fall off the wagon, but they're not going to win the division again. I mean, It's honestly, I don't know who wins the division. Like, if you put a gun to my head and say who's winning the Pacific Division, might as well pull the trigger because I got no idea.
Yeah, I feel like Vegas, and the other thing about Vegas too is that, like, are any of their kids going to make the team out of camp this year? Because that could change everything.
Well, see, I thought Cody Glass was going to make it last year.
Right. Cody Glass, if Cody Glass can come in and adapt quickly to the NHL game, like that, that definitely replaces one of Neal and Perron.
Yeah, absolutely. But Vegas is starting to get, where the Sharks are now, where they've just got all these centers, and eventually they're going to start, moving them to wing. And I don't necessarily think that's the right idea. I mean, a lot of these, especially like, obviously Carlson and Stastny are going to stay in the middle. But I mean, guys like Howla, guys like Cody Glass. I mean, if you ask me, these guys belong playing center, and it's either, they want to play in the top six, they're going to have to play wing. And so I'm curious to see how that's all going to shake out.
And I think another thing too with Vegas is that William Karlsson's going to get paid, but he's going to be hard pressed to replicate last season.
Yeah, that's the other thing is, like, I
don't think he's gonna be terrible. I just think that if you're looking for him to replicate or improve upon last season,
yeah. Like, I think long gone are the days where he scores 6 goals a season. I think he'll still hit 20. But if you want him to be a 40-40 kind of guy, you're barking up the wrong tree.
I think so. I mean, look, he's going to probably prove us wrong, but
yeah,
because what the hell? I mean, I feel like everything anyone says about Vegas never comes true until everyone's like, "Oh, they're going to win the cup," and then
you know what that means? That just means we need to say everything about Vegas.
That's it. Everything.
That's going to be our next show. Is we're just saying everything about Vegas so that we're somehow right.
We missed Vancouver.
I really thought Vancouver was onto something. I mean, the Sedins are gone, and that's a very emotional Band-Aid that was ripped off. But I mean, Besser's going to be healthy. Horvat having a good year. I really like Sven Berchi. I think he's an underrated player. And, you've got all these young guys who've taken the next step and are going to slide right in. And then you give freaking Antoine Roussel and Jay Beagle 4-year deals. I mean, they're okay veteran guys, but for 4 years, like, I don't understand.
Yeah, I don't understand. They're now the grittiest team that ever did grit. I mean, I think you want guys like that to you need to insulate. I mean, obviously the Sedins being gone, I think that you want to bring in guys for the room. And I know people are going to throw things at me or throw their phone when they're listening to this podcast on it. But I wonder how much of this is an overreaction to not having the Sedins in the room.
Yeah, I mean, not to say that it's definitely important to have veterans. I mean, I think we saw that with Vander Kane coming into San Jose, but I mean, Bo Horvat is a young guy, but he's not a baby. You know what I mean? Like he knows what it takes to be on an NHL roster.
Yeah.
And you've got Louis Eriksson, you've got Eric Goodbranson, you've got Chris Tanev. I mean, these are all older guys. Sam Gagne is there as well. These are all older guys who, I mean, they're not ancient like the Sedins were, but they're very just as capable about being that veteran leadership. And I do agree. I think there was a panic when the Sedins left, and I think who the hell is their GM? Jim Benning, I think, tried to find a quick fix. And I always say Jim Benning is like he's like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, because he'll make some really good moves. Like when he traded away Ryan Kessler, I thought that was amazing. You know, and same thing when he traded away Alex Burrows and we traded away Yannick Hansen. Those were fantastic moves. And I even said, like, when he made that Kessler deal, I said the Sharks need to get a GM like this guy. But then you have, the Beagle and the Roussel signings, and you trade away Thomas Vanek for, very little when you considering that he was having his best regular season in a long time.
Thomas Vanek was actually there. Like if you were looking for like a guy that the Sharks to plug in for, if you're looking for a guy to kind of plug in and replace Bodker on the cheap, like Thomas Vanek would have been the guy for me.
Yep, but which very interesting that he went back to Detroit.
Indeed. I think that I think the problem with Vancouver is that they have kids, but they're just there's that gap of time where they're gonna have to fill before some of these kids are ready. Like they've definitely made some good draft picks. Like I think that I'm not as down on Juolevi as other people seem to be at this point.
No, I think Juolevi is a huge pick for them.
I thought they did pretty good in the last, in this year's draft too. But the problem is those players are going to take some time to pan out. And they're not, I think what these other signings also say to me is they're still not ready to give a full-time spot to the Nikolai Goldobins of the world either. Yeah,
Nikolai Goldobin, Jake Virtanen, Jonathan Dahlen.
I feel like Virtanen, I feel like, has got a spot where, is more secure than a guy like Goldobin. I'm still high on Jonathan Dahlen. I think that he's going to be a player. But it's definitely taken longer than I thought it would for Jonathan Dahlen to be a player.
Yeah, I mean, prospects are weird.
Prospects are weird. They're like goalies. They're voodoo. But yeah, I don't know. When I look around the Pacific, and this is kind of what I wrote today, like I don't really feel like it's, other than the Coyotes, but again, like the Coyotes have a lot of ground to make up. So when I look around the Pacific and I say, okay, yeah, the Sharks didn't get John Tavares, but they're really not any worse for wear for it.
They also didn't get Jay Beagle, so we're okay.
And yes, and they didn't get Jay Beagle, which they didn't go that route, which I'm glad that the Sharks didn't do. I'm glad that there's a spot open on the roster right now for someone to move up into that 4C. And if no one can fill it, then you go make another Eric Fair deal. Eric Fairs are a dime a dozen, and I'm not trying to talk, I'm not trying to besmirch the good name of Eric Fair because I really liked what he did here, but players of his ilk are a dime a dozen. You can fill that kind of hole if your kids can't do it. But I'm glad that the Sharks are still committed to letting these guys come up from the system, and try and do things. And my next article, actually, because I think something that I'd like to talk about more with Kevin on the show, is we've seen a lot of the Barracuda journeymen kind of vanished off the roster over the last couple of weeks over AHL free agency. And that's a topic I'd really love to write about, and also I want to talk about with Kevin when Kevin's on the show. So there's going to be room for players to play, and there's going to be players that are going to be close by, and I'm happy to see that the Sharks are embracing that, and they're going to try and have they're going to give these guys a chance.
Yeah, I mean, and for how many years too that the young guys were, I mean, I'm not saying that Patrick Marleau is bad, but
No.
you think about how many young guys playing time was suppressed so that Patrick Marleau, continued to have a spot on this team. And the same argument can be made for Joe Thornton. Now,
Joe Thornton's a lot more difficult to replace than Patrick
exactly.
Marleau.
Joe Thornton's are a lot harder to come by than Patrick Marleau's are. And I mean, we've seen, Patrick Marleau goes, and we've seen guys like, LeBanc and Meyer and Hurdle who've all
and also Patrick Marleau is on my crap list right now.
Yeah, well,
for his Tavares treason.
Yeah, you know what? I'm mad at Patrick Marleau because not even anything that he did. Like he went to Toronto and that's fine. But I still see people on Twitter and saying, "Oh, Marleau's gonna come back," and Marleau this and Marleau that, and it's like, will you just let it go? Like, he moved on. You should too.
Yeah. Oh man, I could do an hour and 30 minutes on silly Marleau stuff just from Leaf fans and from Shark fans alike, because I think there's this belief that he's just gonna find himself on Robert Island, and anyone that knows Patrick Marleau, like, that's never gonna happen. If the guy wants to play, he's gonna play as a no move. Yes, Benedict Marleau, thank you.
Not only that, but Patrick Marleau is in better shape than some guys in their 20s.
Yeah, like this idea that he's just gonna fake an injury and sit in Rhode Island is it's completely ludicrous to me. And the idea that he's just gonna the Sharks are just gonna take him back, and because there's no real money left on that deal after the signing bonus, and they're just gonna send him back to the Sharks to retire. Like, I'm fine with, like, I don't know, I just feel like the Leafs are going to have to do something. They say that they're going to be fully committed to doing, to keeping Matthews and Marner and Nylander. I don't think Patrick Marleau is going to be the guy that goes to make that work.
Well, see, now, if you're looking at, Matthews coming in, and you're looking at John Tavares coming in, like, if you're Nazem Kadri, like, how irked are you that you're probably losing playing time?
If I'm winning, I don't care. But if I'm not winning...
Right, but I mean, every player has a degree of selfishness to them. And not to say that that's bad. I think in order to be a good athlete, you have to be selfish. So...
Isn't it, it's going to be interesting to see, too, because I don't feel like, Austin Matthews, great player, but, and I don't want to go too far off into a Leafs tangent here.
You're going to have Leafs fans knocking on your door.
I know, punching me in the face. It's going to be interesting to see, because Tavares has always been a guy who's been, like, kind of low-key, keeps to himself, doesn't really want to be the spotlight, but Austin Matthews withered under that spotlight in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting. A lot of people are like, oh, well, is Matthews going to be happy that Tavares is coming in to be the guy now? If I'm Austin Matthews, I'm ecstatic that John Tavares is coming in to be the guy, because I sucked at it. Like, not on the ice. Not on the ice. I don't think, I'm not trying to say Austin Matthews is a bad player. I just think that when you have a guy that can take that media spotlight off of you a little bit, and I think that's going to be great for Matthews. It's kind of like, I think that Patrick Marleau was a guy that just should never have worn the C for the same reason, right? Great on the ice, but just, couldn't deal with the media pressure, especially when the national media, not so much in San Jose, big deal. San Jose media, it's like, oh no, I have to talk to Curtis Pichelka for 10 minutes. Like, like, you know what I mean? But like when the national media, like when the playoffs hit and you have all like the big media in town, like Marleau withered under that pressure. And you could see like there was such an improvement in just his happiness and his play when they took the C off of him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I just feel like that's going to be the same for Matthews.
Well, and I could be wrong here, but I think that, if we're looking at Marleau's time as a Shark after he lost the C, I think that his first season without the C may have been his best season.
It was.
Yeah.
I without looking, because I don't do facts here. I just do what I think is right is going to be right.
We know everything.
We know everything. I am the smart guy. Yeah, and see, now we look at, even the podcast has gone to, how does this affect the Leafs? I'm sorry, guys. This is what happens.
Vince G, Sharks prospect scrimmage tomorrow. Well,
apparently we had to go down. We got stuck in this trap of how does this affect the Leafs. Damn.
Well, you know what? Who did the Leafs draft this year?
Rasmus Sandin, who I really like.
Hey, you know what? The Leafs drafting Sandin means that, you know, the Sharks prospect scrimmage has lost out on a Swedish defenseman.
That's true. That's
So
true. There you go. There's your how does it affect the Leafs?
Tune in next week for. Oh my goodness.
Oh man, I'm sorry guys. I didn't mean. I didn't even. You know what I did? And I did it like this. I feel bad because I am the. Because I obviously being the Canadian on the show, like you would expect me to derail it in that direction, and I apologize. Without even thinking of doing it, I dragged things down that road, and yeah.
Well,
so there you go.
You're also in Leafs country, so it's okay.
I do it without even thinking. I do it without even planning because that's just how I've been programmed to follow hockey. I have to, you know, filter it through the lens of the Toronto Maple Leafs because if I don't, what the hell's the point?
What nobody can see is that John Tavares is behind your camera with cue cards.
That's right. You know, it's Doug Wilson didn't put a gun to his head, but John Tavares has a gun to mine. I apologize, guys. Yeah, tune in next week for Leaf Color Glasses, or if the Lightning get Erik Karlsson, I don't know. Background might change. No, I'm just kidding. It'll never change. Maple tinted glasses. Maple tinted syrup.
Oh, jeez.
All right, so now that we're kind of just gotten into silly land here, thanks for everyone for tuning in tonight. 20 people to watch a show on July 7th or 5th or 6th. There was the 6th here now, but 5th is just amazing. And I always appreciate all you guys tuning in to watch. Again, we're going to do this all summer. I can't promise you it'll be a weekly thing. I know we got like a couple of crammed in shows. We're going to do a show Sunday. I do, like I said, I really want to get Kevin back on the show because I do want to talk about a lot of what's going on with the Barracuda next. I think there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on with the Barracuda itself, and I really want to get I really want to get Kevin's take on that, so I'm looking forward to doing that down the road. Check out my article today on Teal Town USA. My summer prospects series, my summer off-season series is gonna obviously be something that I'm gonna write weekly, bi-weekly. I'm not sure yet. We'll see. It's basically whenever I have an idea of something to write, I'll write it. So check that out. Be sure to subscribe. Make sure you tell 2 friends. All that wonderful stuff. Mr. Hockey Jerk, I need your final thoughts, sir. Through the lens of the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Well, you know what? I am wearing a blue T-shirt.
Okay.
And blue is the color of the Toronto Maple Leafs jerseys. So there you go. There's your Maple Leafs connection. You know what? This was fun. I haven't been on a pod in a while due to various circumstances, you know, being sick and dogs with crises and all that kind of stuff. But, you know, man, 4th of July is a hell of a time to have a dog. But, you know, we're going to get rolling here. Things are going to be good. Summertime. This is your only Sharks, NHL, ice hockey, whatever podcast during the summer. So we're relying on you guys to provide us the content. We know you will, because you guys always do. I mean, we've been doing this. I think this is our 3rd summer of podcasting. So it's going to be good. You know, besides that, you can follow me on Twitter if you would like to get into arguments or watch me, you know, yell at a wall on @hockey_jerk. Where you will come to find out I'm not a Pittsburgh Penguins fan, and the Sharks could have in fact had Matthew Barzal.
They could have had.
Back to you.
My name's Ian Reed. Also, but be sure to follow our co-host who couldn't be on the show tonight due to circumstances at Kevin Lacey 22.
And do not follow @puck_over_glass. Do
not follow that guy. That guy is the worst. You can follow me at Ian Blogs Hockey. Again, you can read my stuff on Teal Town USA. My final thoughts are: I am still a Sharks fan. I am not any other team's fan, but I do love hockey. So mostly everything I tweet is still about hockey. Twitter's becoming insufferable now because there's not enough hockey talk, and it's all getting taken over by baseball. Don't take over my feed with baseball, people. More hockey.
God, I hate baseball.
thanks to our 2 new subscribers tonight. And again, make sure that if you have a friend that might like a Sharks podcast that needs their hockey fix in the middle of August, July, check us out. Other than that, guys, thanks for watching again. Have a good night, and we will see you on Sunday night. Ciao.